Thank you so much for joining A Shark's Perspective, the podcast with subject matter experts in marketing. You know, when you think of how customers are finding you online, we've gotten too used to the idea that everything has to be driven to a website, that every optimization has to be made with driving a customer to a website. But when you think of all the channels of where people are living online, are you actually helping customers interact with you where they want? Dan Golden is the CEO, Chief Search Artist, and co-founder of Be Found Online, a leading digital marketing agency. And on this episode, we'll discuss reducing friction and making it easier for people to buy your stuff where they want to interact with you. So let's tune in to Dan, who we found online, with an online shark on this episode of A Shark's Perspective. Dan, thank you so much for joining us on A Shark's Perspective today. Could you provide us at a high level a brief history of your own experience and background thus far?
Absolutely. Oh, you want it brief? Okay, I'll talk quick.
Okay. It's only a 2-hour show.
All right, perfect. Well, digital marketing is all I've ever done. I was touring with a rock band right out of college and got a search marketing internship on the side, and that got me into this industry back in 2003, and been here ever since. So spent some time at big agencies, was at Google for a little while, and started Be Found Online about 10 years ago. So digital marketing agency, first got our start doing search, but we do everything other than build websites now. And it's been a very fun ride, 10 years into it. And we've got about 70 people worldwide. We're the number one best place to work on Ad Age a couple years back. And look forward to talking some shop today.
Well, that's outstanding. So you've got offices in Chicago, London, and Singapore. Is that correct?
That's correct.
What made you set up shop in those in Belize? Yeah. So I can understand Belize, but what made you set up shop in London and Singapore as opposed to traditional New York, San Francisco, Chicago, L.A.?
Yeah, it was. In business, I've always kind of gone where the food is and jumped after opportunities when we run into them. So we had a partner agency we've been doing a lot of work with. They brought us a big client several years back, and our values aligned. We really like them, and saw some mutual opportunities to service international clients and actually have some boots on the ground. So we actually created a joint venture with a company that was already there, so I didn't have to go through all of the headaches of finding real estate and a leader for the international office. We kind of plugged into a really great team, and it's been a wonderful partnership. We're several years in, and everything still seems to be on the up and up. So find an opportunity, even if it wasn't in your plans, and pursue it if it makes sense.
It does. So the most important question I'm going to ask you on this podcast today is, what's the deal? What's the obsession with orange? Because every time I've seen a pic or a video of you, it's been with an orange shirt or more noticeably an orange jacket. But your color of choice, I would have thought would have been gold, based on your name. But what's with the gold jacket or the orange jacket rather?
The orange jacket, it just makes me happy. I love the color orange. Outside my office, there's a bookshelf with 50 shades of orange where I've kind of compiled all the orange crap that I've collected over the years. And I just like it. That's in its simplest form.
There you
go. The jacket, I have a funny story with the jacket. I had gotten a cryptic text message from my favorite Uncle Gil, and it just said jacket size. And I clarified a little bit, but eventually gave him the size. And about 3 months later, apparently he was at a mall and saw that orange jacket with the paisley and knew I had to have it. And that's the story of where the jacket came from. He came over for dinner and brought it over, and I think I've worn it to every conference I've spoken at for the last decade. So
nice.
I just hope I don't rip it.
Yeah, no kidding. So let's dive in anyway into the topic to podcast, and that's marketing beyond websites. I mean, at least professionally for me as well, a big chunk of my own career began and has been in creating websites and pushing traffic there, optimizing landing pages and converting that traffic online or even driving it to a call center. But I think now we're getting to a fairly mature place with a lot of other sites, like with the the Amazons of the world, and even social channels like Facebook, which has taken such a play in lead gen. We're getting a lot more mature with looking elsewhere. Voice search is growing exponentially. Apps are on everyone's phones. Let's talk through then what's next and how websites are becoming less important. And if you would, kind of give us a brief stance on that.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I mean, this is I know this is a topic I really wanted to talk about, and it's a tough one for me because I'm an old grizzled search guy, and so everything I've done my whole career has been about driving traffic and converting that on behalf of our clients, and it's not going away. I'm not anti-website. Like they're still a necessary component, and certainly a lot of evolution as we move across devices. But when we look at the data and we look at just consumer behavior, websites are becoming less important in a lot of cases when someone is sometimes lower down the funnel. And again, I'm going to make a lot of generalizations here, and
Sure.
and certainly the role of a website for a complex B2B product versus selling T-shirts and toilet paper or pushing someone to a retail brand. There's a lot of different angles and lenses to look at
Sure.
here. But when you take a step back, consumers. I'm going to use Google's micro moments term. And just as a little aside, I believe in micro moments and sort of the way customers are consuming bits and pieces of content, or if they're looking for a location, they don't want to know your whole story. They're already ready, and it's all about reducing friction and how do you get the consumer or your customer what they want in that moment. And in that moment, oftentimes, a website offers more than they need, or when someone's consuming content in the Yelp app or or within Facebook, they want to stay within that environment, right? Native context for your brand. So when you sort of think about the old path, which is let's try and get these clicks from every platform possible and drive it back to our site, and that's our form of measurement is all about traffic.
Right.
You're really missing the boat.
So, what kind of engagement rates are you seeing on other channels, and are the numbers higher?
Yeah, it certainly depends. Depends by client or by brand. One of the numbers that really stood out for me was a study that one of our partners, Yext, put out last year, where they analyzed all of the local actions for retail brands. So get directions, coupon prints, all of the all that activity that shows local intent. And they're sort of in a unique position because they're able to measure what happens on the profiles or on your Google My Business page, anywhere where you have those profiles off site. And the number was kind of staggering. It was 2.7 was the number. So meaning almost like a 3-to-1 ratio for every interaction or every local action that happened on a retail brand's website, you were having 3 interactions on the profile pages. So for retail, that's almost a 3x multiplier of consumers within app, and that intuitively makes sense. Even with Yelp, I went through the dance with them we work with a lot of restaurants over the years, and our clients really wanted to get that traffic from Yelp and get people clicking over to their website.
Mm-hmm.
And then, just put your consumer hat on. If I'm in the Yelp app and I'm looking for food and I pick the restaurant, I went there because I want to take action and I want to find it. Not because I didn't go to Yelp to find a restaurant's website, right? You go to Google for that, or you key it in because it's all fairly obvious recovery search for a brand. So that number is what really stuck out at me and kind of helped change my thinking around how we prioritize measurement and also just focus of where you're spending your time as a marketer.
Sure, and that's such a great point. What are you seeing from a local search perspective? You mentioned GMB earlier, so.
Yeah, well, that's that has an effect in a lot of different ways. Google, I guess probably by the time this podcast comes out, Google is now automatically linking up any Google My Business profiles based on the domain with AdWords accounts. So even within the biggest or the typical website traffic driver of paid search, as you're using location extensions, a big chunk of your traffic is actually staying within maps, especially on mobile, where customers are trying to find information, store hours. It's all this basic stuff. And one of the things we've noticed when we kind of looked across our portfolio of accounts, and again, this is a big range depending on the type of business and proximity targeting and all of that, but we've seen with a lot of our retail brands, 20 to 30% of your paid search traffic isn't ending up on the company website. Let me just repeat that, because I think that has not sunk in, and marketers are very not as knowledgeable about it. 20 to 30% of your paid clicks are going into maps and don't show up on your website. And it's been fairly consistent since 2017. For comparing 2017 to 2016, there was like 100% increase. So when we talk about attribution and the way marketers look at paid search performance, within analytics, there's this delta between clicks and sessions, and that missing delta is really it shows up in a couple different places. So within AdWords, if you segment by click type, you can see the percentage of traffic that's going to get directions, click to call, get location details, which is really pushing the local maps. And the only way to measure that currently is through store visits and store visit tracking. So that's and it's been huge. It's really had an effect on a lot of the ways we run campaigns. As we looked at some underperforming campaigns that had a lot of those near me keywords and local keywords, we were seeing some decreases in website appointments or website transactions.
Sure.
It turns out most of that traffic is staying within maps. But when we look at it through the store visit lens, it was driving a ton of traffic. So really good. It performs well, valuable for brands. It drives store traffic. That's what, retail needs more than anything right now. But it's a missing gap for a lot of marketers, because
Sure.
it doesn't show up in reporting, and Google has been relatively, I would say, not upfront about this data and what it means.
Well, they love that everybody's looking at last click coming out of GA.
Yeah, but it doesn't even show up in GA. That's the whole thing. This is valuable traffic that you're paying for, that's delivering customers to the brand. But as marketers, we're all sort of trained on GA. And listen, I'm drinking all this Kool-Aid still. I have 70 GA windows open at any given moment, just because it's fun digging around there. But it doesn't tell the whole picture, right? GA tells you what's happening on your website. It doesn't show you what's happening on maps and what's happening on your Facebook page and all these other places where your brand is living, as it pertains to SEO, right? So with the rich results showing more and more, right, quick answers, the knowledge graph, like a lot of that information that consumers would go to your website for, they're getting that directly in the search results. So when we look at SEO reporting, it's no longer just about what was my ranking and how many clicks did that get me, but there's a value for visibility, and there's a value to have your, to show up in the quick answers and the rich results. So it's a toughie, as a performance marketer that spent all my time selling against anything that wasn't as uniquely measurable as last click traffic. But brands need to start thinking about, if you're getting less traffic from search, and a lot of these platforms are driving less traffic these days.
Right.
Even for B2B with LinkedIn, the algorithms are giving a lot more value to native content, right? So if you post a link to your blog post on LinkedIn and compare that to a post where you have put your blog post in and published on LinkedIn Pulse, they're going to get a lot more love to your content that lives within the LinkedIn platform, because that's what their algorithms incentivize. So again, just sort of shifting our thinking about everything in marketing being about driving website traffic as our only measurable. It's a big shift. It's a tough one for marketers who are accountable for measuring everything. How do you measure that, right? It's sort of reintroducing some softer metrics about engagement and visibility. And I know the challenge of a CMO is they're like, great, I can't talk to my board about engagement and visibility. What did we sell?
Then let's switch a little bit and talk about some of the other devices that you're starting to see people coming in from: the smart screens, the smart speakers. People talking to their cars, their watches. What kind of things are you seeing with that?
Well, what you're not seeing is a brand's website on any of those
Right,
devices,
right, exactly.
right? That's so certainly a lot of growth. I could spew out some stats here, but they would be out of date by the time the podcast got edited. I've been giving this voice search, or the kind of the future of search presentation to I teach it to Paul in Northwestern. Um, and over the years, I've kind of had this presentation, this deck, this story that I update a little bit every quarter with some new stats, before each session. And this fall, I mean, the presentation I gave in May, scrapped it. 80 pages. I can keep maybe 15 of it because it's moving very quickly. I think the smart screens and this is obviously a growing trend. And we've seen that over the years with desktop traffic declining, moving to mobile. It's going to continue to evolve, and the way a brand lives within within that environment is different, right? It's smaller interactions. It's you're not going to Google recently added the markup language for speakable annotations. So giving brands and publishers the opportunity to have the 10-second or the 20-second voice summary of an article. Brands need to be thinking about this. What kind of interactions do your customers need? And there's sort of a tendency to jump right towards the shiny object of, like, we need to build our Alexa skill, or let's get first to market to have an Apple Watch applet for our brand. But think about, what are the things that reduce friction? What are the in a car, what is a customer going to ask about your brand that's relevant? And there's sort of this, even with like chatbots, there's this tendency for marketers to want to solve the most complex problem, and that's certainly not where to start, right? So what are the simplest things that your customers might be doing on smart screens, through voice search? And there's a lot of tools out there to start gathering some data, and that would be my recommendation, is to really start looking at what is actually going to provide utility, right? I've got some, and I'm like a voice search nerd. I've got Google Home, Amazon. I use and try everything, because that's kind of my job as a marketer to stay on top of this stuff. And so I'm definitely like in that early adopter category, but focusing on what can you provide utility for your customers on these types of devices, and the intent of what someone needs when they're asking on a smart speaker at home versus a voice interface in a car. Probably some different angles that a brand would need to focus on.
Sure.
So I wish I had the answer. The space is moving so quickly, and I think smart screens, that's going to be that seems to be what's growing the fastest. And I actually don't have a stat for that one, but when we look at even just what Google just announced, it's sort of these that next level of a smart home speaker is having that visual interface, but websites aren't optimized for that. And even as a consumer, I don't think I would want a brand's website. I would want
Right.
A picture of a product, or it's very different. So I think there's sort of this notion, or this how do we take our website and modify it for this device? And I think that's kind of the opposite way that brands should be thinking about it, which is what is the experience? What is the utility? How would a consumer interact with my brand on this, device, screen, speaker, and start there.
So let's talk a little bit about social channels as well, especially when you talk about Messenger and different bots that live on Facebook. What kind of things are you seeing there that brands can help engage with their customers?
Yeah, well, I'll answer that from the lens of a customer, which is, I like talking to people I love, but I don't like talking to people at companies, picking up the phone. I don't like filling out email forms and waiting for it, or a website form and hoping it went somewhere, or even like the chat on the website. when I need an answer or I'm annoyed with a brand or have a question about something, I go to their Facebook page and I ask in Messenger. And for most brands that are in on it, I get a much quicker response. And so, certainly there's this brings up the question of chatbots versus human agents and where do the lines go between them. And, that could be a whole episode exploring the, sort of the conversational interface between brands and their customers. But it's just another outlet, right? And it's maybe not a different chatbot, or it's certainly the same call center, but customers want to interact with brands in different channels, right? So it's not all come to our website and fill out a form. If someone wants to order a pizza through Messenger, let them do it.
They do, but I tell you, to your point earlier, and when you think of having an interaction through a chat bot or a messenger, when you get it on a social site, when you've asked for it and you get a quick response, you can get that same response through somebody's website, and it's almost annoying. You're in I don't know if it's the social context of where you are as well on Facebook, for example, which helps make that engagement better.
It does. And, even if it's not, it doesn't have to be better or worse. It's if your customers want to do it and they're there and they're looking for it,
Exactly.
Then you have to be there. And so, some of this is becoming, certainly there's some bright, shiny objects in some of this, but it's already table stakes for now, where you taking a step back of all the stuff we've gone through, you have to be where your customers are. And your customers are in a lot of places that aren't your website.
So talk about the value of influencers and where they're, those different channels and how they're able to at least drive traffic for clients today.
Yeah. Well, and that's another one that I'm not sure that it's even about traffic, right? It's just about your brand living through, living in different places, and influencers, whether it's a paid influencer campaign that a marketer has driven or just someone on social media who's influential and had an experience with your brand, that's probably the scariest piece, where brands have less control, right? Because you're relying on individuals and their perspectives. And so influencer marketing, I was using air quotes, but it's existed forever, even before it was one of our favorite buzzwords, and there were platforms and articles and Instagram millionaires. So just kind of acknowledging, everywhere, influencers it could be in reviews. It's not just, someone scantily clad on Instagram holding your widget in front of a pool in Paris. Influencers is anybody, in my opinion, anybody talking about your brand or anybody representing, either in a positive or negative light if you don't control it. So, it's scary for a lot of brands, certainly a lot of marketers who like, there's some that love taking risks, and some brands that are great about that. And certainly when you deal with enterprise companies, nobody wants it to be their fault. If the influencer says something wrong, it's that's where I think brands have the least amount of control. And the smart brands take the risk, because when you allow an influencer to be authentic and talk about your brand in their voice and taking some risks, that's where you get the big payoff.
But where are you seeing influencers really drive traffic for clients? And some brands like to have the influencers drive traffic from a blog to their website, to a social page or landing page. Some of them like them to help convert that person on the influencer's blog or their channels. What kind of things have you seen with your own client? If they're using influencers, where are they driving it to if it's not the website?
So in terms of influencers and where that traffic is going, this is a lot of the benefit that brands are going to see from that is going to be downstream and over time. There are certainly some Instagram influencers and some platforms out there that are really built around direct response, and trying to measure directly what's happening. But if you think you can measure perfectly what's happening from influencers, you're either overconfident or missing something, because it's a tangled web. And someone who saw a post about your brand on Instagram very well might come back through Google search and after that view is gonna search for your brand. So with influencers, I think it's incredibly powerful, especially for not for every type of brand, but for a lot of brands, it's an amazing opportunity to get in front of new audiences. In terms of like driving traffic and commerce, I've seen hits and misses, and I think it really needs to be thought of not as a 1 month influencer test, but really having a commitment.
Couldn't agree more.
That stuff, yeah, that it builds over time, but it's certainly not what I would consider one of those measurable direct response tactics. And I'm sure there's a lot of folks in the space that might debate me on that point, and I'd love to hear it, because I know there are platforms that are coming of age that do better at measurability with influencers. But if you're trying too hard to get a last click sale from an influencer, that typically means they're being disingenuous and coming across as a salesperson and not an influencer who's trying to share some information or a product that they like. And typically that stuff is less effective at building your brand.
Sure. And I think something that it's got to mature for influencers as well is them being able to understand and promote commerce and conversion. There's so many that can promote likes and shares and retweets and everything else, but we haven't gotten to a point especially where they're helping solve that puzzle for a client and they help people buy from the brand directly, or at least buy from the brand on some site, because so many of them have driven so much of the social fun stuff, not the commerce and sales pitch. So it's something we just got to continuously work on. So let's talk a little bit then about another issue, is where we're seeing payments being accepted today. It's on a lot of different channels other than just your typical e-commerce page. But what are you sort of seeing with some guidance for that?
Yeah, well, I think this could also be an answer of what's next with influencers driving commerce and,
Sure,
and
exactly.
transactions. And traditionally brands were all about get people to my website, get them to sign up and create an account on the website. And I understand why, right? Your margins are better when you control the transaction. You get that customer data, you get them on your email lists. That's all good, and that should be a focus. But it's not a reality. So accepting payments, whether it's through Google Pay, Amazon Pay, PayPal, customers, and this is again, pizza, flowers, plenty of products that are, kind of an easier purchase. It's not necessarily the same thing for B2B or a highly complex, probably not going to buy a car with Google Pay yet.
Not yet.
But, it's all about reducing friction and making it easier for your customers to buy your stuff. Google, a lot of what Google is working on right now is trying to get Google Pay as more of a universal payment platform. And, when we talk about voice commerce and people's ability to buy things quickly, that's all going to be through these connected pay options, right? Nobody's going to buy from a brand over your Google Home device if you have to speak your credit card number. So it's another one of those tough propositions for brands that are typically focused on building their customer lists, but make it easy to buy. There was a whole lot of hoopla around the buy now buttons on Google, Instagram. That was like 2 years ago, and I thought that was going to be a landslide, but it grew a lot slower because I think consumers were just not as comfortable with that, and they weren't ready to have their credit card living in all these other platforms. But that train is chugging along, and your customers are going to want to buy from you where they want to buy from you, not necessarily on your website, right? Messengers, any there's a lot of other places.
Yeah.
Voice search, Google Shopping, Instagram, where make it easy to buy, accept payments everywhere.
Yeah, it used to be an 800 number and a credit card machine at a retail store, and that was it. You could call into somebody and give them your credit card. Now there's 5,000 different options, and it just keeps growing. It was a extremely important topic. We've got to keep evolving. I think the unfortunate part is Google has spoiled us to so much of a degree that we just kind of got boxed in with thinking of commerce and marketing and living within that one realm. And at least Amazon has helped break up, the Google stronghold, and with Facebook too. But it's obviously starting to open up people's thinkings to all the different channels, all the apps, all the different sites that people look at this. And I think it's you've given some great expertise on this. So Dan, we got a rapid fire with the 5 most important questions that you're going to be asked today. So be prepared here. As a Chicago man,
all right, let's do it.
New York thin crust or Chicago deep dish?
I actually prefer the thin crust, but I think all pizza is delicious.
Jordan or LeBron?
Jordan.
Thank you. Sears Tower or Wilder Tower?
It is now called the Willis Tower, I will pick that one.
Sears Tower or Willis Tower? See, I can't even get that right. Sears Tower or Willis Tower?
Oh, well, if that's the choice, then definitely Sears Tower.
There you go. Batman or Superman?
Superman.
Biscuits or cornbread?
Biscuits.
Perfect.
Definitely biscuits. I happen to live in the biscuit corridor of Chicago.
There is a biscuit corridor in Chicago?
It's unofficial, but I just realized that I live in it because there's these just bunch of biscuit restaurants that all happen to be within a block radius.
Dan, where can people find out more about you, follow you, get your marketing advice? If based on this conversation you point us to a website, that's going to be a little upsetting, considering we're talking about traffic outside the website. But seriously, where do people find out more about you and the team?
Sure. Well, it's not just a clever name. I can be found online, on LinkedIn. Easy to search and find me. I'm always happy to connect. If you are connecting after hearing the podcast, please give me a little shout out. I get about 100 connection requests a week, and would love to connect and talk shop. But you mentioned the podcast. Twitter, I'm on the Golden Dan, and always happy to talk shop, help, make intros. Would love an opinion if I missed something on this podcast, or if you had a different opinion. And if I've got one final plug here, where you won't find me is at my office on Election Day, November 6th. We're closing down BFO and making sure everybody on our team goes to vote. So if you happen to run a company or have some influence with that, would love for you to join me and close on Election Day and see if you can't help get the vote out. So that would be my final plug. Thank you so much for having me. This is a whole lot of fun.
And as they say in Chicago, vote early and vote often. So, no, just kidding.
Well said. Said.
Thank you so much, Dan, for speaking with us on A Shark's Perspective.
Rock and roll. That was fun.
So there was my conversation with Dan Golden, the CEO, Chief Search Artist, and co-founder of Be Found Online, a leading digital marketing agency. Let's take a look at 3 key takeaways from our conversation with him. First, websites are becoming less important than they used to be. Although they're always going to be great for long-form content, consumers are consuming bits and pieces of content across a lot of different channels, and a website often adds more than a consumer may need. Quite simply, consumers want to stay in the environment they're in, so don't look at trying to get clicks only to your site. We as marketers often try to fix the most complex problems, but are the ones you're trying to solve the ones that will help them the most. Don't think of just how to help them, but also think of where they are. Second, Dan's made a point to cite this research, so I want to emphasize it again. They found that 20 to 30% of paid search traffic isn't ending up on your website. Clicks are going to maps and other locations that don't show up on your website. When you think of attribution, there's a delta between clicks and sessions. And this is especially important when you think of that near me kind of traffic. And when you think retail, it's often that the only thing to measure is store visits. It's simply worth noting that GA doesn't give you the full picture. Third, customers want to interact with brands in different channels, so it's not always come to a website and fill out a form. I loved it when he said this: if someone wants to order a pizza on Messenger, then let them do it. You have to be where your customers are, and your customers are in a lot of places that aren't your website. Just make it easy to buy. Got a question? Please feel free to find me on LinkedIn or send me an email to kenneth@asharksperspective.com. Thank you so much for taking the time to listen to this show regarding another one of the many components that makes up marketing today. I sincerely appreciate the time you've given to me. I applaud Dan's comment and echo that you should take the time to go vote. Just be sure to listen to this podcast while you're standing in line, and join us on the next episode of A Shark's Perspective.